I'd now like to introduce Dr. Chris Anderson, Deputy Chief Plant Protection Officer for New South Wales DPI.
Thanks very much for joining us today. My name is Chris Anderson. I manage the bee biosecurity program in New South Wales. Have also consequently been involved in the varroa mite response. And I'd like to just talk you through a few things today about our bee biosecurity program and also give you some updates around the most recent version of the varroa mite emergency order, which we expect will now stay in place, establishing some fairly clear guidelines around how to move within New South Wales as a beekeeper. And we have worked very hard to reduce a lot of what was considered to be regulatory burden on beekeepers and to keep it to an absolute minimum, whilst we still attempt to manage the risk of varroa in New South Wales and prevent it from rapidly spreading. So firstly, just a bit about the New South Wales Bee Biosecurity Program. Under the National Bee Biosecurity Program, we have one funded role, who is Rod Burke. Many of you will know Rod. Rod's been around for a while now. He's very good at what he does and is very approachable and available. Whenever you need assistance or advice, Rod is a great person to reach out to, particularly for commercial beekeepers. And the good thing is we have recently been able to fund an additional 2 bee biosecurity officers in New South Wales. One of those I'd like to introduce to you as Sam Jiggins, who has started with us coming from the varroa mite response program. So Sam is now an additional resource for the industry. He's there to provide advice and hands-on support, especially in a post-varroa world that we're now in. And the other bee biosecurity officer who we're currently finalising recruitment for will be announced shortly. And both Sam and Rod and the new BBO, their work is coordinated by Megan Power, who sits in the Plant Biosecurity Unit. And between the 3 of the BBOs, they work across the National Bee Biosecurity Program. So this is a national program that ARBIC and Plant Health Australia oversee. And so we see either fully or partly funded bee biosecurity officers in all of the states and territories. And then the National Bee Pest Surveillance Program, which is the program that manages the sentinel hives at the ports of entry across Australia and is the program that detected varroa mite in June of 2022, leading to the response. And these 3 BBOs will also be playing a very, very important role under this transition to management for varroa as we move away from eradication and to a management phase for varroa mite in Australia. So their email addresses are there on screen for you, Rod and Sam. If you need to take note of those email addresses, please do, and please contact them whenever you need to. Any questions around beekeeping, they will be more than happy to assist you. So one of the key things as we've moved away from eradication to a transition to management program is the creation of 2 new zones. So we have the management zone, which is broken into 2 parts, one around Kempsey and one around Sydney and the Hunter and the Central Coast, and the suppression zone, which is the rest of the state. So these 2 zones replace what used to be called the blue zone, the purple zone, and the red zone. Those management zones are based on the areas that we know have the highest levels of varroa mite detection in the state. And so you can see this heat map here. And this heat map is something that DPI will continue to develop as we roll out this transition to management program in New South Wales. And the goal of this heat map, which is available on our website, is to help you understand where varroa mite has been detected and what its levels are at in those areas. And this is key for you in terms of making decisions about where you might or might not want to move hives to, or if you do want to move hives into one of these areas, the fact that you're going to need to protect those hives by applying treatments and monitoring for varroa mite if you're going to go into one of those heavily infested areas. So what are the rules? What do I have to do as a beekeeper in the suppression zone and in the management zone? Well, for both of those zones, the monitoring requirements are the same. So you need to monitor each apiary for varroa at least every 16 weeks and treat at a threshold within 14 days of the positive test. That threshold is 6 mites or more in a single alcohol wash, soapy water wash, or sugar roll test. So 6 mites or more in one test. That's the threshold, and that applies at this time of the year. Liz Frost will talk more about those thresholds and how they differ. But for the spring, summer and autumn, generally speaking in Australia and under this order, the threshold is 6 mites. That's what you need to be looking out for. If you're at 6 or above, you need to treat. So every time you test an apiary, so the testing, remember, is at the apiary level, you must keep records and report those results to DPI, negative or positive. Doesn't matter, because that's what we're using to inform that heat map, which in turn is informing you and giving you information around where varroa mite is and where it isn't, and what the levels are like across the state. There was a contentious requirement to submit a photograph in previous orders. That has now been removed. So to report the results of your alcohol washing, your sugar roll test, or your soapy water test, you can use the online form, or you can call those results through to the 1-800 number. Now, how do you do this? So how many tests do you need to do in an apiary, and how do you work out whether you're above or below threshold? So you need to test the greater of 10 hives or 10% of hives in that apiary, whichever is the highest number. So here there's 3 examples. There's 20 hives in each one of these apiaries, and in the first example 10 hives have been sampled and no mites have been detected in the test. So for each hive there's 1 test. You only need to do 1, and there's no mites detected in any of those tests. So you've done 10 tests, 1 test on each hive. There, you've met your requirement. You don't need to do anything other than continue to monitor. In the second example, 10 tests have been done. Mites were found in 3 of those tests, but all of those tests came in for this time of year at below threshold. So as for the apiary where you detected no mites, what you need to do is continue to monitor, but you don't need to do a treatment. There's no regulatory requirement to do a treatment in that scenario. But in the third scenario, as you can see, we've tested another 10 in an apiary of 20. However, one of those hives is above threshold. So this time you do need to treat, and you need to treat all 20 hives that are in that particular apiary. The hive that has 8 mites in it is above threshold. Don't get confused, because the hive that has 5 mites in it is below threshold. But if it's 6 and above, it's above threshold and needs treatment. So treating hives, where do you get treatments from? It's a great question. A lot of people are asking it. You can obtain Baverol from DPI, but you can only get it if you're above the threshold. There are limited stocks and they are running out. So you need to call 1-800-084-881 if you want to obtain Baverol, and you will need to show that you've met that threshold. You can also go to retail and wholesale suppliers, and the best I can do is tell you to go and Google it. At the moment, most people will be aware that one of the major retailers has come online and is selling Baverol. They will start selling additional products shortly, as will several other suppliers. So products that we expect to be widely available soon include Baverol, Apistan, Apivar, and Formic Pro. As you can note there, only one of those is an organic treatment. A lot of questions about oxalic acid. There's a lot of work going on to prepare a case for approval and registration with the APVMA. Oxalic acid in beehives needs to be veterinary grade, and that requires manufacturing at certain standards. Industrial grade oxalic acid for cleaning concrete is not suitable to use in beehives, and it is illegal to use in beehives. So despite the fact that some people might think to do that, and we have seen that through the response, that is an illegal use pattern. It's better to wait for the APVMA to approve a veterinary grade product so that we can get access to that and treat our bees with it. What about moving hives within each zone? So we've talked about monitoring and treatment. What about moving? Well, it's pretty simple. To move hives, it's the same as it always has been effectively. Complete a hive movement declaration form when you're moving those hives. And when you do that, it requires you to declare that you have done the TOCAL online training and that you're compliant with the monitoring and treatment requirement. Why are we continuing to require this? Well, mostly this is around interstate movement and the requirements of states like Queensland and Victoria and South Australia, that they want to see traceability in New South Wales if they are going to consider reopening their borders for New South Wales-based beekeepers. So we are keeping these requirements in place for now. Some of the questions we're getting: if I'm above threshold when I do my monitoring, do I need to treat my hives before I can move that apiary? And the answer is no. The monitoring requirement is that you must monitor. If you're above threshold, you must treat within 14 days of that detection. Do you have to treat at the same location that you detected the threshold? No, you don't. You can move that apiary somewhere else and then treat it, so long as the treatment occurs within 14 days of that detection. That's the key thing. Now, moving hives between zones from the surveillance zone to the management zone, yes, that is not an issue. You can do that, but again, you must fill out the hive movement declaration form, and you must be compliant with your at least a minimum of 16 weekly monitoring, and then treating apiaries that are above threshold within 14 days of the detection. From the management zone to the surveillance zone, no, you cannot move colonies into the surveillance zone. If you want to, then you must apply for a permit and your individual case will be assessed. And if there is a way to minimize or mitigate the risk, then the DPI will talk you through that. And it may be possible, but as a blanket rule, the answer to that question is no, and you must apply for a permit. So there is a number of other things that I haven't talked about here, including honey supers. Generally speaking, within each zone, honey supers can be moved around, but there may be a few minor requirements. It's best that you check the DPI website where you can find the most recent copy of the order. That order is now in place and is unlikely to change until such time as we may move to a biosecurity order that is not an emergency order. But it will likely stay in place up until the point where DPI has completed the voluntary euthanasia and disposal of hives that a lot of beekeepers are requesting. And so it's likely to stay in place at least until that work is completed. And the other thing I need to point out and really emphasize to you about those zones is those zones are time limited. They will not be in place forever. The maximum time frame that they will be in place is 12 months. So in particular for the management zone, it's 12 months since it was declared. So it will not be in place for longer than 12 months. The purpose of those zones is simply to slow down the potential rapid spread of mites into the rest of New South Wales. But we do expect that there will be levels of mites building up in other parts of New South Wales. And so as that starts to equilibrate across those zones, it will make sense to remove those restrictions on hives coming out of those areas. But if you are a beekeeper who is in a management zone and you want to move supers out, you can do that. That's not an issue, but you need to comply with the rules around those honey supers. So you can manage apiaries that are out in the suppression zone. You can have your shed in the management zone. There's no issue with that. But you just need to comply with the requirements that are in the order. So please visit the DPI website for more information around the order, where you can find a copy of that order, read it and understand it. And if you need any assistance or support with, particularly with Varroa, but with AFB and other diseases and pests, please don't hesitate to reach out to a bee biosecurity officer. That's what they're there for. And I hope this presentation has been informative and useful. Thank you.